Before I introduce our next speaker, let me say to you, the graduates, I'm envious. When I graduated from college some years ago, and I do mean some years ago, we had a commencement speaker, but I tell you, I completely forgotten who that might have been. In fact, I imagine a few months after commencement, I couldn't have told you. So you, on the other hand, will never forget who spoke at your commencement. You are most fortunate. I've had several opportunities to introduce our next speaker. It has always been a great honor. In most of these cases, I have referred to him as the former President of the United States, the 39th President, the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize and many other awards, a graduate of the Naval Academy, an artist, a craftsman. However, there is much more to this man than that. He is also an academic. He is one of us. He is a brilliant nuclear engineer, a superb teacher, a gifted lecturer, and a prolific scholar who has published over 25 books. He also holds honorary degrees from over 30 different universities, including a doctorate from Georgia Southwestern. So with that in mind, I feel it appropriate today in this setting that I introduce the former United States President and Georgia Southwestern alum as Dr. Jimmy Carter. Dr. Carter.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Kendall. This is a special honor for me today because I'm not accustomed to introducing other people. Usually I get introduced myself, and I have to say that during the years I've been in politics, I've had good introductions, I've had some really bad introductions. And when I get the really bad introductions, I always get up and say, of all the introductions I've ever had in my life, that is the most recent. Well, today I have the honor of introducing my own grandson, so it's going to be a special one for me and a great honor for me. As a matter of fact, the Carter family and our family have been in this county, in Sumter County, since 1833. And the speaker today is the sixth generation in our family. As a matter of fact, I went here to just this great college. My wife graduated from this college. My oldest son, Jack, finished at this college. My middle son, Chip, went to college here. My youngest son went to college here. The library is named after my father, James Earl Carter, who was in the legislature. So where do you think my grandson should have gone to college? What do you think? Yeah, sure, but he went to Duke University. And I think he tried to get into Georgia Southwestern. He couldn't make it, so he went to Duke. But since he graduated there, he's made up a lot by moving to Georgia. He came first to the Carter Center, where Rosa and I spend our time now, and he was an intern there. He helped us with monitoring elections in Palestine. He helped us monitor elections in Liberia. And then Jason decided to go to the Peace Corps. My mother was in the Peace Corps when she was 70 years old. And Jason was the first great-grandson who was a Peace Corps volunteer, Upper Peace Corps volunteer. So he has that honor. And while he was serving in South Africa, he began to write a book called Power Lines. Jason wanted me to announce that the book is still on sale. And then he wanted, when Nelson Mandela, the great leader from South Africa, was finally let out of prison after more than 20 years, he became a friend of mine. And after I left the White House, I was going to go down to South Africa and meet Nelson Mandela. And Jason, who was in the Peace Corps there, wanted to meet Nelson Mandela. And I said, Jason, I've got a lot of people to visit. Why should you want to meet Nelson Mandela? He said, I've always wanted to meet a politician that went to jail before he served in public office. So I let Jason go with me, and I had a lot of business I wanted to do with Nelson Mandela. So when I got there, I introduced my grandson Jason to Nelson, and Jason began to speak in Zulu. which is Nelson Mandela's native language. So I sat there for 30 minutes and listened to Jason and Nelson Mandela talk to each other. They never paid any attention to me at all. Jason came back to Georgia and decided to go to law school, and he graduated from Georgia Law School, and now he serves in a very famous law firm in Atlanta. And as you probably know, he also has been elected to the state Senate. Jason has two sons, and one of them is named Henry and one is named Thomas. He's a good father. And when he was elected to the state Senate, he's from DeKalb County, so he served in a district in DeKalb County. But I can say that he still remembers his roots from his ancestors in South Georgia. So even though he's from DeKalb County, he's one of the champions of rural Georgia. He fights for the parents in rural Georgia to have children going to college. He's a champion of trying to have equitable transfer of Hope Scholarship funds, and he's one of my favorite grandsons and one of my favorite speakers. I'm honored and delighted to introduce my grandson, Jason Carter. Thank you.
Thank you, Papa. I wasn't nervous about this speech until he said he was going to introduce me. And then I still wasn't nervous about my speech, but I didn't know what he was going to say, so he did a good job, and I appreciate that. It is a great honor for me to be here today, and thank you for allowing me to share this special day with you. I'm particularly glad that I'm giving my very first commencement address and that I'm doing it here at Georgia Southwestern. As my grandfather mentioned, this school is incredibly important to me and my family. As he mentioned, there's buildings and schools that bear the names of my ancestors. My father, my uncles, my grandparents have all attended this school. But I do want to take a minute to say that this institution is not just important to me and my family, but as a state senator in this great state, I can tell you that Georgia Southwestern is a crucial part of the state university system, of the future of Georgia, its economy, its social welfare. And for that, on behalf of the state of Georgia, I say congratulations to you on your graduation from this fine institution. As a politician and as the grandchild of a president, I've received, even recently, a lot of advice about how to give a good speech. The best advice you can take for yourself as well, it is this: you have to have a good beginning and a good ending and put them as close together as you possibly can. So with that in mind, my beginning is going to be about grandparents. And I know that there are a lot of grandparents in this room, including mine, and it's a wonderful topic, but I thought that might be a tiny bit underwhelming. So the end, and I don't want to oversell it, but the end is going to be the secret to wealth and power. So you can get excited about that while I talk about grandparents. The first grandparents that I want to acknowledge are my own, as you know, and as you've heard today. My grandfather is Jimmy Carter. He was the President of the United States. He won the Nobel Peace Prize. My grandmother was the First Lady of the United States, as an internationally renowned advocate for mental health and caregiving. But I want to tell you something. They're just regular people. Just like your grandparents that are here, assuming that your grandparents are sort of rednecks from Sumter County. They go to the Dollar General store, they do all the things that grandparents do. They have some trouble sometimes adjusting to the times. I remember my first email that I ever received from my grandfather not that long ago said, "Please let us know if you don't get this email." So all of us wrote him back and said, "Papa, we didn't get your email." And the house that they live in is the same house that they've lived in for years and years. And despite all the changes in their lives, they've stayed the same people that they were, even down to the fact that when you go to their house and you turn the dial on their microwave, it ticks down. It takes like 15 minutes to pop popcorn. And in fact, this morning even, I know for a fact that my grandfather spent this morning out in the woods with a turkey call, just like many of you probably did. And the only difference between him and some of y'all's parents and grandparents is that when he comes back with no turkey, he can say, well, the Secret Service were making noise, Sometimes they're so normal that it's scary, and as given what they've done in their lives, those two things sometimes clash. And I'm going to tell you a story that my Uncle Chip told me, so I know it's true. The folks that know Chip are laughing. When they got back from the White House, they still had the same glassware that they had, before they left. And a lot of it was things that they'd gotten, for free at a fast food restaurant. Just like some of y'all. And eventually the inevitable happened. They were hosting some foreign dignitary. And my grandmother almost fainted when she reached down and realized she was handing this dignitary a Tweety Bird glass that they had gotten for free. And so they went and got some new glassware. The other grandparent that I want to mention, who's also a person from this area, just a rural country person like many of us, it's my great-grandmother, Miss Lillian. As Pawpaw said, she was in the Peace Corps, but her decision to go was remarkable to me. She was born in Richland, Georgia in 1898, and 68 years later, she'd moved 17 miles to Plains. And one day she was sitting there looking at the TV, and there was a commercial for the Peace Corps, and it said, "Age is no barrier." And so she said, well, I'll apply. And the first thing they did was they gave her a complete psychiatric evaluation. But she passed it, and went off and turned 70 in the Peace Corps, as he mentioned, and that means that it's not too late for anyone here. So her experiences in India, I believe, infected my whole family. The idea that you can go somewhere that far away as a person from here and make the kind of impact that she made, it caught on. And I think when my grandfather and grandmother left the White House and they were in their 50s and she was standing there saying, well, I turned 70 in the Peace Corps, what are you going to do? And today, as you know, the Carter Center has programs in 65 countries. Half of them are in Africa. It's dedicated to peace and health. The work of the Carter Center was noted by the Nobel Committee when my grandfather was awarded the Peace Prize. And I think a lot of that is traceable to the experiences, as I said, that my great-grandmother had in India. And so with that heritage, when I was y'all's age, I left for the Peace Corps in South Africa. Mandela was still the president, as Papa mentioned, and it was a remarkable time to live there. The country was still divided, but there was this national sense that they were changing and transforming from apartheid into something new. But where I lived in South Africa, people still carried their water from the river, and they still built their houses out of sticks and mud. But you could drive 3 hours to Johannesburg and eat at a McDonald's or a Starbucks and see a movie in THX digital surround sound that looks just like Albany or Atlanta. And that's where I met the last grandparent I want to talk about. We called her Gogo, which is the Zulu word for grandmother. My grandfather bragged on my Zulu. I don't know how accurate that was, but I can say, so if that's not an applause line, then I apologize. But Gogo lived her life constrained by apartheid. As a black woman, apartheid told her where she could live, where she could go to school, what she would be taught. The curriculum was designed to teach people, quote, in accordance with their opportunities in life, which meant things like in black schools, the reading comprehension was about working in a mine. Told her what jobs were reserved for her. If she'd been Indian or what they called in South Africa colored or white, she would have had different jobs that she could do. But because she was a black woman, it all depended on her skin tone. And when she was old enough to work, she went to Johannesburg and she worked in a sweater factory. And then she got a plum job as a maid for a white family in Pretoria. And then in 1975, she was forcibly removed from her house and taken out into a rural area called Gangwane, which they said was her homeland, even though she'd never been there. And she was dropped off at a crossroads, essentially in the middle of nowhere. And when I arrived at that same place 23 years later, people still carried their water from the river, and they still built their houses out of sticks and mud. but Gogo was the president of the school governing body. She was the head of their Methodist church group. She ran a women's gardening project that had received an award from the United Nations. She was the landlord of a huge complex that had a mechanic, a general store, a dressmaker, a gas station. She was the postmaster. She ran the dry cleaner outlet. And she was the principal of a preschool that had about 45 kids in it, 3- and 4-year-olds, and she ran it as a nonprofit. She fed the kids 3 times a day. For most of those kids, it was the only time they would eat. And she taught them English and other things and math. And the question I ask myself every day is this: what would she have done if her grandfather had been the President of the United States? Or, same question, what would she have done if she was sitting in your chairs today with a college degree in the United States in 2013? That her life was as successful as any other grandparents that I've known. And the other grandparents in my life, I promise, would agree with that. And that brings me to the secret to wealth and power. The secret to wealth and power is Gogo's secret. It's the secret to wealth and power is recognizing that you have it. Gogo had it in a tiny village in Africa. She used it to change her world and her community. And sitting here today, you have wealth and power in spades. You live in this country, you have a college degree, you are elite in this world. The Bible says that to whom much is given, much is expected in return. It also says that we must fix our eyes not on the things that we can see, but on the things that are unseen. Wealth is not a matter of what car you drive. It's a matter of what roads are open to you. So as you graduate today, I hope you'll see that there are no closed roads for you. I hope you'll take what you have seen and unseen and do all that you can with it. And I hope at the end of the day, you won't be consumed by the quest for wealth and power, because the question's not where to get it. The question is, what are you going to do with it? Thank you.